Okay, I wanted to create another video tutorial on nesting if you have the full version of CAD where you can use the nesting software or doing an array. In this particular instance, what I'm going to show is just a single part on the sheet. We'll go ahead and do this with nesting first, and then we'll go into the arrays. With nesting, let me go pull it up. Highlight your part that you wish to nest, arrange, nesting, and this is not going to create parts for you. So like an array where you can actually add to an item, let me go do that. Layout, array. I can sit here and say if I want to do this on a grid, I can bump my X up, I can bump my Y up. Nesting does not do that. What nesting does, let me fill the sheet up actually while I'm at it. Okay, and let me just go ahead and duplicate this with a Control D, pull this off here. Now nesting is going to take your existing parts and try to nest them on the sheet. By default, your sheet, if it is never specified, is your layout of your table here. I'm a 2x4, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of these parts though. I'm going to go arrange, nesting, and there's a few columns to worry about on the nesting. The first column is which corner do you want to start your nesting from, and what's the priority of the direction that you want to nest in. I like starting on the bottom left, and I like nesting in the Y direction before moving over into the X direction. So this is how I have it specified. How much do you want to rotate each part in order to nest these? The smaller you make this number, the more your computer is going to work to test each part and rotate it. If I set this at 90 degrees, it's going to rotate a part maybe a couple of times. If I set it at 5 degrees, you can imagine what is 360 divided by 5. It's going to be rotating each piece, I don't know, 15, 16 times or so, and it takes much longer. This next one down here is nesting margins. This margin is around the outside perimeter. For instance, sometimes when I cut my sheets down into my 2x4, sometimes I'm a little off and I'm maybe 23 3/4 inches. So I like to put in maybe an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch margin around the outside edge, just to make sure that I'm staying on the material. The next piece, if you highlight over these and just leave your mouse there, it'll tell you what it is. Clearance between parts. This is how much clearance we're going to have between parts. Right now I have it just a little over an 1/8 of an inch. If I were cutting this out a 1/4 inch, I'd probably go a little bit more. If I type 3 divided by 16 and hit enter, normally that would work. This is one section of Torchmate CAD that does not do the calculations in that section, which is unfortunate, but 3 divided by 16, 0.1875. So 0.188, that's the rounded 3/16. Okay, so now this next section is error factor of clearance. I've read up on this, and I keep forgetting what it is, and it's something that doesn't really apply. I don't think you really need to go messing with it. Just leave it at the default, which is 0.1. And then your final column here over on the nesting, you have 6 options. The first thing is to allow mirror parts. Now if I were to, let me break these up, Alt-G for ungrouping. Now if I zoom in on this part, if I take this part and I mirror it, this is my horizontal or vertical mirrors. If I mirror it, you can't see the difference really, right? So, unless my part was off. But if I go and create, for simplification, let's create just a small little part here. Control 2 in my case is the basic weld. Now if I go ahead and I'm gonna make this just a little bit up. There we go. Okay, so now if I mirror this in any direction, you can see that, you know, this is what it's talking about on the mirroring. So let's keep this part off over here just in case we need to use it again during this and explaining this. So go back to the nesting. So do you want to allow parts to be mirrored? Sometimes you can't, sometimes you can. In this case I can, so I'm going to say yes by clicking it. It's pressed down. Do I need to keep groups intact? In my case, when it's talking about a group, it's not talking about this part. this part is not considered a group. This is all one part. If I do Alt-S for show my fill, this is a single part, even though it consists of, if I hit Control-B on this, even though it consists of 4 different objects at this point. Once you make the part by doing a XOR weld or some other type of weld, and this is not considered a group anymore. However, if I took a bunch of these and I did a Control-G for group, and I select any one of these, this is now a group, and the rest of these are still single objects. I'm going to Alt-G that. You noticed I didn't have to actually select the one part. I could highlight. If this whole thing right here is one group, and I highlight everything, and I just say Alt-G for ungroup, basically. Control-G to group, Alt-G to ungroup. That'll ungroup any groups that you have highlighted. Okay, so go back to nesting. Let's highlight these parts again. Arrange, nesting. So if you need to keep something in a group, go ahead and keep the group intact. The next one is include toolpaths. I haven't used this one. If I were to do the nesting, I would actually generate the toolpath first, and then I would nest the toolpath. That's how I would personally do it. I haven't used this option. The next one, block nesting. If you want to do block nesting, imagine a box, an invisible box around this. You can see these points on the outside. When you click on block nesting, it takes a part, draws an invisible barrier around it like this, and basically doesn't allow any other parts to be nested within that barrier. So if this barrier is right here, this part could be nested that close, and that is it. When that box is not checked, it'll allow parts to nest in here. It'll nest them in their real area instead of the boxed area. So we'll go back to arrange, nesting. So that's what that block nesting is. I'm sure there's a use for it. You'll probably hardly ever use it. I can't imagine a reason to use it yet. So this next option right here is nest parts in holes. So say like you go and say like we're going to cut a large part. And I'm going to do XOR weld on this or Control 1. Show this fill. So you see I created this part. Well, this whole section in the middle is considered done. This is your part. Your part is from 0 point on X to whatever it is on this outside, and just basically from corner to corner. However, if you go out to layout, arrange, nesting, and you check this nest parts and parts holes, this basically says yes, it recognizes this is cut off, this is a cutout, and what it'll try to do is nest as many of these parts inside of that as possible, which hopefully will get cut out first. I haven't actually done that and tested it to see if they're cut out first, but so that's what that piece is. It just says if I have waste from other parts, feel free to take these other parts and try to nest them inside of it. Okay, so now highlight this one more time and go to nesting, and the final option here is select a sheet. So if you don't want to use your default sheet, which is your table, then you can select a sheet, and I will actually show you that one, but I would like to do the nesting piece of this first. So what we're going to try to do first of all is allow this to nest these parts on the sheet to see how many we can fit. For those of you that do not have nesting software, I'm going to actually show you ways to do this with the array button, with the array, layout array, or whatever it's called. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of these. Let's see how many parts are on this one section. We're almost a full sheet here, and we have 110 parts. Okay, so remember 110. We're going to highlight everything here, arrange, nesting, and I'm going to start in the bottom left corner. I prefer to go vertically before moving horizontally. How many degrees am I going to allow these parts to be rotated? I'm going to try two things. First thing is I'm going to just try 90 degrees. This is a very simple part. I think the best fitting, honestly, from what I can just imagine, would not be rotating at all and just kind of staggering the parts one next to the other. So what I mean is, like, if you take this row, you can stagger it manually like that. I think that will give us the best fit. But I'll just say, take all these parts, I'm going to allow it to try to rotate at 90 degrees. And I think everything else I'll keep around the same. 1/8 inch margin, 3/16 between parts. Leave that alone. I will allow it to mirror. No, I'm not going to allow it to mirror. That's just an extra step, and I just don't think it's going to do us any good in here. I don't need it groups intact. I don't need these tool paths. I don't need block. I don't need nest parts and holes because none of the parts will fit in these little teeny holes. And then select a sheet I don't need. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. I expect this to go pretty fast because I'm only allowing 90-degree rotation. But remember, we have 110 parts on this sheet. I bet I could squeeze a little more with an array, but we'll find out. Let's hit apply. And I'm going to go ahead and pause this while this is calculating. Oh, it's done. This is just an error, not an error message, kind of a warning message just saying, hey, I couldn't nest all of your parts on one sheet. So if you look in your bottom right-hand corner, we have 2 sheets. Okay, so I can right-click on this sheet, and what it did is it created one sheet, and then it moved all the remaining parts to the other sheet, trying to nest them as much as it could. So this is what the nesting did. I want to highlight this and see what we got. We got 127 parts. That's actually pretty good. I'm surprised. That was unexpected for me. 127 parts with the nesting. Okay. I'm going to Control Z this to undo, and what I'm going to show you now is how those of you with CADlite would do this. This is the way I was doing it myself. Let me just go ahead and delete these for now too. Okay, so what I would do is I would highlight my actual part, go Layout, Array, and then I'm going to choose the grid option. You can go vertical or staggered, whatever you want to do. Grid's fine. This is the vertical spacing between parts and horizontal. I like to actually add a part on and just kind of eyeball it usually. If I look at that, that looks fine to me. Now the array is going to try to keep it on the sheet. If I can't keep it on this sheet, it's not going to allow me to add one there. So I'm going to just go ahead and close this. Layout, array, again, let's just add one more. It's not allowing me. So highlight this, Control D for duplicate, and I went ahead and added it on. If I zoom in, these parts are decently spaced. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate the row. Sorry if there's a blip there. My daughter opened the door and I had to answer some questions. So anyway, let's highlight this again. Array, layout, array, and what I would do is I would go ahead and add one in the X direction. And trying to. Let's move it off the sheet. Arrange, no, layout, array, bump one in the X direction. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and close this, highlight all of these parts, and I'm going to actually maneuver these in and zoom in. I did that with my rolling my wheel on my mouse, and the spacing there looks pretty good to me. Now if I were to take this and try to put it on the sheet, it won't fit because of this top one, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to move this point to 0, 0. And this is how I'm going to try to array it. So now I'm going to say layout, array. Now that I've got this whole thing selected, let's go ahead and just bump it up in the X direction. I'm going to move the spacing down in the X direction. I was going to try. This step was too big, so let's go 5. It's okay. If we can't get it to work for us, well, I'll show you how to adjust it. Okay, so now we've got all of these parts on here. What I'm going to do, in fact, sometimes it's easier to do this in smaller sections, so I'm going to just take this, get rid of this, highlight this section here, hold down my shift key and push the left arrow, having a hard time speaking, sorry, and move that in close, highlight this, layout. You can duplicate it if you want, Control D, that's fine, but I'm just going to lay out array. Alright, Alright, sorry, another blip. Child number 2 coming in and disturbing me. They're all supposed to go swimming, and I was going to wait until they left. Maybe I should have. Okay, we're going to move this in. Just to show you don't have to go to Layout Array, I'm going to hit Control D for duplicate. Bring that over here. Okay, Control D for duplicate again. Bring this over here. Let's just move it in. Okay, so I think we're really close there. Obviously, these aren't going to fit. Now, I can't remember the exact number. I think, what do we say, 127, 130, somewhere in there we had that many parts with the nesting. And doing it myself, just eyeballing it, I've got 147 parts on here. So in this particular case, doing it manually instead of using the nesting software has given me much better results. Again, I would probably create the toolpath on one of these and then tweak the toolpath. You know, for instance, I'd want a pierce point in this area instead of like right in between these two parts, which is what happens sometimes. So I would create a toolpath on one particular piece. Let me just do this real quick, okay? We'll just do a meld toolpath. Let's get rid of, click this button up here. Let's, one more time, show toolpaths. Get rid of the regular part, just show toolpaths. See what I mean? This, I don't have my lines coming in quite at a 90. I think it was 75 degrees or something. So this is a problem. You don't want to go and change this a million times after you've nested everything. So I double click on this. I'm going to bump my start points, which is fine. I'm going to click on this button, the lead in, and I want my lead in to be, we'll say somewhere over here where we know we have some space. Hit apply. I'm going to double click on that again. You'll notice that if you go and adjust your lead in, some of your other lead ins go back to their default. So I adjust my lead in first typically, and then I'll go back and tweak these, and then I'll hit apply. Otherwise, if you go and tweak your lead in again, those will get reset to their default. So now I would take this piece and zero it out on the X and Y. The bottom left nub is selected here, and then this is what I would actually go and do arrange layout on. And instead of doing this whole arrange, what was that, layout array, instead of go ahead and stepping through this whole thing again, hey, let me put the toolpath in this time. I won't necessarily need to show you, but we'll just manually zoom in and bump this and see. I've actually got a problem with the way that's laid out. I will actually want to change my start point to maybe somewhere over here. But you can see why you want to do this probably with your toolpaths instead of the individual part. Save your part off in a file so you have access to it and you can modify it in the future, but save these toolpath files. Anyway, what I want to get back to now, I'm doing Control Z for undo. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this many times. All these parts here. And the reason why is I'm going to show you one last little piece on the nesting. So like you have a sheet and you go and cut a few things out. You've cut out a part here. You cut out a part here. Say like you've cut a part here. You want to try to utilize. Told you I'm having a hard time talking. You want to try to utilize what space you have available. Well, if you can go out and take some measurements, you can go and create your own sheet saying, this is what I have available. That's a little close right there, actually. We'll tweak that line here in a second. I have seen problems with this option, and it typically happens when you have more parts than will fit in the specified area. But it is a cool option. I have seen it work. I've seen problems with it. I haven't figured out what my problems were with it, so I can't really give you any pointers or tips yet on that until I actually figure them out for myself. Okay, so we'll say this is our sheet. This is our available area to try to lay these out. This is one of the coolest parts of nesting, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight what we want to nest. It's going to give me complaints because I know there's way too many parts here. There's over 220 parts, and that wouldn't even fit on a full sheet. It's going to complain because it won't fit in that area, but that's alright. Arrange, nesting. All my settings are still the same. I'm going to go ahead and allow it to rotate up to 45 degrees this time. Should we do more than that? Yeah, just for the sake of this example, let's go ahead and go, I'm going to say 7 degrees. I will allow the parts to be mirrored if it wants to. No, I don't care about the parts being mirrored because it's not going to make a difference. Groups intact, no. Block nesting, no. Nest in parts, no. We're going to say these are completely used up, these sections. And then select a sheet. This is what I want. Select a sheet. You notice when I click select a sheet and I come down to some object that I have on the table, I can select it. I wish when I selected it that it would actually highlight it so you had some type of a visual feedback, but it doesn't. So I just highlight it, select it, hit apply, and as soon as I do this, because I'm allowing 7 degrees of rotation, this is going to take, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. And I will pause it so you don't have to sit here and watch it. It's like watching paint dry. So I'll start the recording here in a second. Apply that, it's thinking, we'll pause. Okay, that actually went pretty fast. I was surprised. I did get it complaining about, not being able to fit all the parts on the same sheet, but it did go ahead and create them in that area. Isn't that pretty cool? I think that is one of the coolest features about nesting, is basically utilizing the material you have and fitting it in there. Anyway, if you come down to the bottom right hand corner, you'll notice we have 1 out of 3. That means sheets. And so what it tried to do was go ahead and nest these. Now, the very first sheet that we selected, which was this whole outlined area, that's the sheet that it does. Otherwise, when it goes to the next sheet, it's assuming you have a brand new sheet and it just nests it as much as it can on the default sheet, which is your table size. Now, if I highlight everything, let's see how many parts we got on the default sheet. 131, so it actually was able to squeeze in maybe about 4 more parts than with the 7 degree rotation that I gave it than it was before. So let's go to the next sheet, and you see it started filling this sheet up, started in the bottom left corner, went vertically, and then started moving to the right. That's what I told it to do. That's how I like filling up my sheets. Anyway, that's nesting. That's sheet 03. Let's do Control Z. I want to do this one more time, but this time I'm just going to go back to the arrays for those of you that are doing this manually. But this time what we're going to do is we're going to actually create a little bit more complicated of a part. Not that it's going to be anything special. Okay, let's highlight all this and do a basic weld. So now we have this part. For those of you that have CADlite, you don't have the nesting options. Let's make this the best fit that we can, and you're just going to have to eyeball it, sometimes play around with it a little bit. This looks like a pretty good fit to me. I'm going to go layout, array. It's going to stay on the grid because that's what I had previously. I'm going to stack those a couple of times. Now I can't fit them all in that way, so let's move this down a little bit manually. I love the array option, honestly. I use it all the time, even for just fitting parts. Okay, so this doesn't look like it's going to do me much good right there, so let's rotate it 90 degrees. Let's Control D, fit another part in, see if we can. Now that isn't bad. You notice how well these are fitting. I like that better. So let's delete these. Now again, I'd be doing this with tool paths and not with the part, because then if you have any problems with your tool paths and how they fall. Just a second, phone is ringing. Okay, hopefully no more interruptions. So let's just go ahead and do this arrange, no, layout, array. Let's go ahead and stack these up in the Y direction. And let's move them a little closer. It's pretty good. And let's stack a couple more of those. So this is how I would be doing it with CADlite. Okay, so highlight all of these, Control D to duplicate. Move these over here, and it's snapping to the 0 point. No, I say that and it doesn't do it. There, now it's snapped to the 0 point. If I move these over, I can get a better fit if I move them up a hair, move them over. Let's go check our top piece. It's still on, so good. So now highlight everything, Control D again for duplicate. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so let's move this over. Doesn't fit so well if we try to keep it on the bottom. If I move it up though, I'm going to lose parts. I think the best thing for me to do is just keep it on the bottom here and just squeeze it in as tight as I can. And we'll do this one more time. Highlight all these, Control D for duplicate, and it's going to basically be the same thing. Move this over. Okay, so now this last row, let's get rid of all of these except one of them. Rotate this 90 degrees. So the nesting's thinking for you and rotating and doing all these fittings for you. But the array, I mean, it's pretty powerful. You can do what you want. And sometimes, like I said, like I showed you in the very beginning, you can even come up with a better solution than what the nesting software gives you. Get better utilization out of your parts. So let's go layout, array. Let's stack some more of these. And I forgot to tweak the distance between them, but that's okay. We'll just do it manually. Shift, hold down my shift and move my arrow keys. And these last two parts aren't going to fit. I do want to show you one little neat trick though people are asking me about. Okay, so if you use your arrow keys, right, left, up, down, it moves these minor little steps. If you hold down shift and do the same thing, it's jumping probably 5 or 10 steps instead of one step. See how that moves faster? If you zoom in, you can get tiny little steps. The closer you zoomed in, right here on this grid, for instance, shift is moving it that much. No shift, you can get some pretty good refinement. You want to move it fast, zoom out, shift. See how fast that's moving that. No shift key when hitting the arrows. Anyway, so we've got 49 parts on this sheet. We can try to fit one more on there by rotating it. I don't think it's going to fit. Yeah, it's not going to fit. Flip it. It's not going to fit. So you have a little bit of waste there, but I mean, if you don't have nesting software, the array is your best friend, and Control D for duplicate, and you can squeeze these in. And if you were to play around with this a little bit more, you may even get a better fit. But there's a point where you're wasting so much time on it trying to get it all fit together that it may not be worth it. But anyway, I hope that you guys have found this useful. If I do find any cooler tips with the nesting, and I have some tests and things that I want to run on that. If I find out any cooler tips or tricks or anything like that with the nesting or the arrays, I'll see if I can create another video and show those to you. Anyway, thanks for watching.